So if you're anything like me, you're interested in history and treasure and just all kinds of different stuff like that. Now myself, I don't get much time to watch as much TV as I would love to, but every once in a while I catch something, some type of show that kind of catches my interest, and I end up, going down the rabbit hole. Now recently, the one that caught my eye was Blind Frog Ranch. Now, if you don't know anything about this is, a show about a ranch that's kind of near Skinwalker Ranch. And if you don't know where Skinwalker Ranch is, it's a place in Utah where there's like a lot of, paranormal activity. It's got all kinds of legends about it and blah, blah, blah. The interesting thing, though, it's funny because, when I think of Utah, it reminds me of the quote from Full Metal Jacket. Utah, the only things that come from Utah are steers and queers, and I don't see any horns on your head. Now, of course, that quote wasn't about Utah, it was about Texas, but I don't know why. That always comes to mind when I think of Utah. Utah is kind of one of those interesting things because there's a lot of different, travel destinations there. You can go up to the Grand Canyon through there. You can see a lot of interesting things in Utah, but as a Californian, it's weird because we don't really, I would say generally speaking, many of us don't look at Utah as a desirable place to go. Well, of course, you're from California. No one wants to go to California either. I hear you. I'm just saying. But anyway, back to Blind Frog Ranch. So if you've ever caught, the show Skinwalker Ranch, it's all about like UFOs and all kinds of different things, in that realm. Whereas this show Blind Frog Ranch is this old oil guy, and his son that bought the ranch a while back. And apparently there's a bunch of legends about the ranch, having gold, Aztec gold, and, different things like that. And it's actually a really good show. It's quite different than Skinwalker Ranch in that the show is really like, not a lot of hyperbole. Like, it's literally them, hey, I think there's gold over here. Let's just go dig it. And the dude just jumps in the excavator and they start digging a hole. It's like, yeah, which is endearing. Like I said, when you think about, how a lot of other shows are where it's like, I gotta plan it out and I need the permits. If you've ever watched Oak Island, Oak Island's kind of one of those things. It's kind of sad, really, because Oak Island, something definitely happened there. What it was, I have no idea. But whoever went through all the engineering feats of, what occurred there, that's pretty crazy. But the interesting thing to me is that, with something like Oak Island, something clearly happened. But is there anything left? Is there any treasure there? Is there any, is there anything like that? At this point, I'm not sure. I mean, how many seasons are they going on, and how many other failed ventures have people, spent their entire lives looking for stuff over there? It's pretty crazy. But anyway, back to Blind Frog. The thing with Blind Frog is, in the first season, they end up discovering that the ranch has a, high content of iridium, which the first time I saw it, literally as I'm watching the show, I see them panning out, blue stones or blue objects. And my mind immediately went to iridium because that's something that you see from like meteorites, which makes a lot of sense because I was like, oh, maybe it's iridium. And if it's iridium, then that explains a lot of the issues that they have with electronics and things like that, because as I understand, that's a highly conductive metal from like semiconductors and things like that. Anyway, the point is, with Blind Frog Ranch, the interesting part is, like any of these shows, you start watching it and you're like, it's a bunch of crap, BS. But, they literally, they excavated a hole down to like a cavern that they had like a satellite company, do a scan of their property, and found that there were basically underground aquifers under the ranch. Okay, so they decide, we're going to go ahead and dig down there because we think there's something in it. And like, that's pretty, give them some credit, right? They went through all the trouble of doing something like that. But the other interesting part is, again, just how they go about it. Literally, they excavated the hole, they tried to go in it. And the first season's literally them going into, a cave under their property. And the sun is literally just diving into the hole. Like, no idea what's down there. Just, hey, I'm gonna go into a silt embedded hole in the ground into a cave that who knows what's in there. And they end up finding this giant box made of like huge logs. So it's some kind of human construction down there. And it's like filled with something. So anyway, like it's just a crazy show because, like I said, like the reason that it hooked me was because a lot of these shows, like they just like, there's so much into the, we're gonna do this, and we're hoping to find this, and it's just so much about the planning and the all the hoops they got to jump through. Whereas this show's literally like, no joke, they have an idea and they're just like, let's go do it, let's go try it. Crazy. But anyway, the main premise of the show is that the old guy believes that there's a lot of Aztec gold buried in the on the property in those caverns. And so, like, of course, like, everyone's first thing is, well, of course, that's BS, that's a urban legend, blah, 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 blah. But the crazy part is, like, the fact that they found gold in the cave itself, naturally occurring gold, mind you, but they also found like Spanish coins and stuff in the silt from the cave. It's just crazy. Everything about this show is crazy because, you sit there and think, this has to be scripted. There has to be, I call BS. But the main guy, the main character is just so believable with it. It's nuts. Anyway, the other big thing that's interesting about the show, so, they keep trying to dive underground to this man-made structure down there, and they see that it's filled with rocks. So during one of the dives, they pull out one of these, a bag of these rocks, and they see that, the rocks, they're looking at the rocks. It's not like a local rock. It's some type of different rock. And the reason they know that is they've got a geologist with them, like an actual, the great part about that show is that the geologist is like an oil guy, and he's not like a BS guy. He's kind of like, the facts, this is the facts. Like, they're telling him about all the BS on the ranch, the stuff they've seen. And he's kind of just like, okay, I don't believe in that stuff. Like, you guys are cool, but I don't believe you. But anyway, they bring up these rocks, and, again, they're like a different type of rock than what's found in the area. And so like, obviously that's noteworthy. Like, why the hell would anyone, have these rocks there? And then they end up like cracking it open, one of them open, to kind of see what the contents are. And inside there's this metal pellets in there. And the guy pulls them out. Like, why? Like, how did this get in there? It was clearly put in there in these rocks. And he's like looking at it, and then he, is holding it in his hand. And at first they're concerned that it might be mercury, because they're looking at it and it doesn't look like it's stable. And so the guy puts in his hand, he's like, it's not mercury, it's not mercury. So he puts it in his hand, and the metal turns to liquid. So they're like freaking out. They're like, what the hell is that? Like, what? And it's everywhere in these rocks. Nuts. So I'm sitting there like, what in the hell? Why was that down there? Who would have put that there? Who would do that? So like, it's just crazy. They end up finding, the geologist ends up kind of like really having to study it. Like, what the hell is this? And finding out that it's gallium, which, according to what they were saying on the show, wasn't discovered, formally until the 1800s. But the fact that it was down there, I mean, that structure is definitely older than that, according to what they say. And so it's just crazy. Like, well, first, why would anyone fill rocks with metal? And then why would you hide rocks in a huge cavern underground? It's crazy. Everything about the show is crazy. Clearly, it's got me hooked, but it's on DirecTV. That's the way I was watching it. They found a bunch of stuff, but it's just crazy because during the show, everybody kind of knows about this ranch and, Skinwalker, obviously. So they got a bunch of crazies out there. But also, the other thing that's interesting about this show was that apparently, there's other people that, one of the interesting things about owning land that I never really realized until maybe like 5-6 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, was just that, in places elsewhere outside, the city, that if you own land, you don't necessarily own, the mineral rights, all the other, rights that there can be to land, so you have to look into those things, easements and all these different things, about property, outside the city. And so that kind of stuff's really interesting because, you know, I have a feeling that at Skinwalker, there may be people outside, you know, aside from them, that still own the mineral rights to that ranch. And so, you know, them digging and stuff, especially if they found, you know, iridium, which is very valuable, I'm sure there's people who would, you know, love to take them to court and, you know, take over that claim and take over the, you know, the deposits, all that stuff. And they see some of that stuff during the show, which, again, that could be scripted, who knows? But it's crazy because, like, you know, even a show like this that's just completely like for entertainment purposes, like, you see all these different things, and it's interesting because you wouldn't think about that. You know, if it was my ranch and there was a, you know, a legend that there's something on there, I'm going to be trying to do the same thing. If I know how to operate an excavator, I'm going to be like, I'm going to dig this bad boy up and find that gold, find that treasure, and then share it with the community and do some gauze of naturally occurring gold. But no, if you get the chance and you're bored and you're hungover, go check out Blind Frog Ranch. It is, if nothing else, it's pretty funny. You know, and you can sit there and say, these guys are stupid. Like, why? Who would do this? Like, why would you, you know, just put on some gear and start, you know, scuba diving into a cave? But you can tell that these are the type of people that they are. This isn't BS. They're not acting. This is literally like their instinct. Crazy, crazy show. Check it out.